that's one thing that is great about the outdoor industry is, and I think it's one of the most special things, is we all go out and recreate together, and we're all friends. And so that's the unifying factor, and that's what we needed to make sure we didn't lose through the trade show discussion and move.
Hello, friends. That is Amy Roberts, the Outdoor Industry Association's Executive Director. I'm big mountain skier Lynsey Dyer, checking in this week from Hawaii, where I'm learning how to kiteboard again and getting humbled. It's incredibly intimidating and also awesome and brain building and challenging, but it also is a warm water sport. Oh, craving it. If you have the chance, give it a shot. But back to Amy, who was previously the Director of Sustainability and a member of the Executive Leadership Team at Mountain Equipment Co-op, MEC, where she guided the Canadian outdoor retailers' commitment to business, product sustainability, and innovation. Her story is awesome, and this conversation, we talk about her journey to becoming such an integral part of the outdoor industry and how we all can continue to move forward protecting our lands and building sustainable products. Thanks, Amy, and I hope the rest of you enjoy the show.
So I guess let's just jump into it. Like, tell me your story. How were you raised? You've done so much in governmental world, lobbying, and did you grow up as an athlete, or how did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Colorado, but I grew up on the plains. And so out in eastern Colorado, and maybe you'd see the tip of Long's Peak on a clear day. But I also had the benefit of having two uncles who did a lot of mountaineering, and they've climbed all the 14ers, hiked all the 14ers in Colorado. And so my uncle that's closest to me in age, I'm the oldest grandchild, and my Uncle Jim is the youngest in that 5-member family. It's my mom's brother. So he and I did a lot of stuff together, and I was able to go out, quite a bit with him, and I still continue to do that. And so I always had, the outside bug. And I think the other thing is, we all know, if you have mentors, that's how you get into outdoor activities. It's really hard to just take that on if you haven't been exposed to it. So those were my early mentors. But what I really wanted to be was a journalist. And so, when I started my career, and even when I was in elementary school, I knew that's what I wanted to be. And I actually had a family newspaper that I put out, reported on the activities of the family, and did my own editorial cartoons and stuff called Amy's Advocate.
Wow.
And
how old are you?
I was in 5th grade, I think. Yeah.
Wow. So right at the age of your daughter right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so you get inspired. And I think what I saw, I was inspired by the foreign correspondents then, and the women who, like Georgianne Geyer and some of these correspondents that were in these war zones or behind the, Iron Curtain at that time, and had just led the way in saying women can go out and adventure, but it was an adventure in a different way in terms of reporting what was going on around the world. So that was my inspiration. Cause. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing. I think of that time for me, 5th grade, actually, I still feel like I was so aware. And because of remembering that time, I will never treat a 5th grader like a kid, because I felt more clear of my purpose. And then sometimes now, like, I go back to that. Was that your experience too? Did you have any trouble with being taken seriously or not taking yourself seriously because people treated you like a kid or like a girl, for example, like you can't do that?
Well, I feel like a couple things. One is because the town I grew up in was fairly small. My dad is a really great golfer. And so I spent a lot of time playing golf. And the thing that was about that was that basically the high school was so small that there was no women's golf team. And so I had to play on the men's team. And I had to play off the men's tees. And I was out there with all the men, and they always gave me a hard time. Like, they would do things, more teasing, but they would, empty my bag out on the ground and throw my clubs in the tree. And
Would they do that to the boys too?
No.
Oh, wow.
It was more, they gave me a hard time. And like I said, it wasn't ever really malevolent, but it definitely like thickened my skin a bit. And also I just learned how to take the teasing that I think the boys deliver. But I also knew they had my back. And so that actually helped me quite a bit in working in politics. And also, I think just going out and doing outdoor activities later, that sometimes there's more men than women, is being able to hang with the men and being able to, feel that you could speak up and you're part of the group, and understanding what that dynamic is, but not necessarily feeling intimidated. So, and I think that's one thing that women always face is, whether you're out trying to ski with the men or you're trying to lobby with the men, you don't want to feel that you don't have a voice or that you can't hang with them.
So take me from then. So you're 11, then what's the next pivotal, shift or significant point that, gets us to here?
Yeah, I mean, so I was a journalist at first, and I think then, the point was I started covering a lot of politics, and then really the pivotal point for me was I had been covering the legislature in Idaho, where I was living at the time, and I'd been covering the governor's race, and so the candidate asked me to come be his press secretary, and
how old were you?
24.
So had you gone to college by then?
Yeah, I'd been in college and I'd been working as a journalist for a while.
Where'd you go to school?
University of Missouri.
Okay.
So that, going to the Midwest was a big shock.
Mm-hmm. And was that for their journalism program or any reason in particular?
Yeah. They have an amazing journalism program, and they actually own an NBC station. So you come out of college with real-time journalist experience because we had to put on a newscast. So my transition into politics really was the opportunity to work on this political campaign, and my candidate that I was working for ended up winning.
Wow.
So that was, I think, the next big thing is I became, the governor's press secretary, and
I
was
20 in your
24,
20s.
25.
Wow. That's young.
It was, and there's a lot of pressure in that job, and you're at the center of attention and you're talking to the press. So I would say in some ways, I didn't even know what a big job it was for how old I was. And that actually benefited me. So.
Wow. And I mean, what did you learn? You won that time. So, what have politics taught you about winning and losing and fairness?
Yeah, I think sometimes, it's taught me how to be collaborative, and that you also, this is a long game you're playing. So you don't want to shoot all your bullets at once, or you want to understand that you're going to be playing a long game and that you need to build as many relationships as you can.
How do you create relationships and have your, obviously there's agendas, like that's the whole point, right? You're trying to get your everything passed through. So how, in your experience, how do you do that? Especially working with high-powered, politicians and men at a high level. How do you do that?
I feel like, just kind of try to put that aside, right? And just go in, like the gender issue aside, and just go in and, feel confident that you know your information. So I think the most powerful thing you can be is educated and confident that you can actually tell the story better than anyone else in the room, and you have the data to back that up. And I think one thing that's missing today in our political system, and it's too bad that it's so polarized, is even 15 years ago it was different, where you had relationships with all sorts of people, and those relationships made it so that you could talk about issues where you didn't agree without demonizing the other person. And now that's gone away. So a lot of it was building relationships with the other side, and you're friends with them. You understand, socially you might hang out. So when you give them a call and you don't agree, but the other person's not a bad person. They just have a different point of view. And we've sort of lost that now.
Explain that further. So what do we I mean, that sounds awful, right? I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's what our country seems to have been built on is the melting pot of different culture, different beliefs, and that being okay. I mean, where do you see that going? Especially now, I mean, Facebook, for example, you only see what you want to see. So you assume everyone thinks like you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a big problem, and I do think the modern media has some responsibility for it, having been a journalist, where instead of just delivering the news, now we have talking heads that either are from this side or that side, or defending their candidate or attacking the other person's view. So I don't know. I do think it is partially just getting back to human interaction and one-on-one conversations and coalition building. So, I don't know how necessarily we get back to that, but I do think you still see it in politics at the state and local level because people actually have to come together and work together. And so, one thing that's encouraging to me is the Montana Governor Bullock, was here this week, and I had an opportunity to spend 30 minutes with him, just having a chat. And I said, hey, do you think you can get along now with the governors? Like, do the governors still get along between Republicans and Democrats, and you're able to talk with each other? And he said, yes, it's still the case. And that's kind of my hope. Is I do think at that state and local level, the governors actually have to make decisions. They don't just vote. And so, to the extent we can get some really good things done there, I think it still exists. I think it's more in Congress where we have so much divisiveness.
Do you feel like in the end it's all about communication skill?
Yeah, I think it's communication skills. I also think it's understanding what to be upset about and then what you need to get over pretty quickly. And so I hope
being objective,
being
non-emotional.
objective, and then also not taking slights or holding grudges too long. And I mean, one thing I've learned over my career is to try to just put things behind me. And
you must have to have such a thick skin.
yeah, I mean, this trade show move was definitely difficult because I really don't like to be so front and center and out there. I'd like to be more supportive behind the scenes. But I had to be pretty vocal in trying to lead the industry. But I also, through that whole experience, I think you hear what people have to say, and then you understand, like, you might really strongly disagree with someone today, and tomorrow you're going to call and ask for their help. And that's one thing that is great about the outdoor industry and I think it's one of the most special things, is we all go out and recreate together, and we're all friends. And so that's the unifying factor, and that's what we needed to make sure we didn't lose through the trade show discussion and move.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go back historically. So
Okay.
you just won this race. What's next from?
Well, so I worked in politics, and I spent that time with the governor, and then I ended up just staying in Idaho, and I was actually working in tech. And I worked for Micron, and I actually had an amazing boss there named Steve Appleton, and he was the CEO, and he became CEO at really young age, I think 29. And so when I look back on it, he's one of the people that really inspired me. And I did a lot of the lobbying work for Micron, but also Steve inspired me through his leadership style. And the thing I always took away from him is he had worked his way up, and he never forgot where he came from. And he just stayed to, a real person and built relationships one-on-one with, even though Micron at that point had 20,000 employees, the loyalty that he got from those employees. And so, I think that was just a leadership style for me in terms of saying thank you to all the people that are doing the work that help, wherever you're working, be successful. And if you're in a leadership role, help you be successful. And so as a leader now, I've tried to remember, all of the events that we do and the accolades we might get for having a great breakfast or producing something, good on behalf of the industry only came because of our staff. So I learned that from him. And so basically I did that for 6 years, and then I had started rock climbing more and more, and I was spending all my free time doing that. So I decided to quit my job and take a year off and go climbing, which I was, early 30s. So my dad was pretty horrified because I had a well-paying job, and I didn't know what the future would hold. But it was one of the best things I ever did, because I had the freedom of having this year off, and I lived in Vegas, spent a lot of time rock climbing at Red Rock Canyon. And then in the summer, I lived in Yosemite and on the east side in the Sierras. And one of my most memorable trips during that whole period is I did a trip, a ski traverse in the eastern Sierras, basically along under the Palisades, along the John Muir Trail. And it was amazing to go in there in April and ski it, because that trail's so packed in the summer, and in the winter, spring, no one's there.
How long was it?
It was a week.
So you were winter camping,
carrying all of our own gear. And it's funny because when I was climbing, and even on that trip, but more so in the climbing, usually I was the only woman again. Yeah, so all my climbing friends were men.
Were you in a leadership role at that point, or were you one on the?
I'd say I was more, they were mostly like a lot of guides. So they were all better than me. So it was that, I think the instinct is to like take care of the girl, which sometimes I probably appreciated. Yeah. But then also, just encouraging me to like take the sharp end at some points and things like that. So
do you feel like any of those outdoor pursuits, have taught you anything that you've directly used in the political world? Skill sets or?
Sure. Like I think grit, and just being able to stick to a goal, and like having grit or stick-to-itiveness, that sometimes you're uncomfortable or it's cold or you're afraid. And that can be the same as, advocating, is that some of these efforts take a long period of time. And if you get too set back, or you give up, or you get demoralized, whether you're out trying to complete a route or you're trying to get a bill passed, you can't do that. You got to shake it off and take a weekend off and come back fresh on Monday, keep working on it.
What does motivate you? Like, now you're like the face and you're the voice of our entire industry. How does that feel? And how do you stay motivated and clear about, what we're all here to do?
Well, I mean, I definitely think I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I also think it's an immense responsibility.
Right.
And I think one of the main things is to make sure that we stay bipartisan, because that's one of the main
strengths
of our industry,
sure.
right? Is that we have people that participate and love the outdoors, and they have all
no matter
different
what side
political
you're
stripes,
on.
right? And I think that's actually something we can bring in a place that's pretty divisive right now. But I also think we have an obligation, and I see our companies expecting that more and more, that we step up and defend public lands if they are under threat. And what I've said to myself, but I've also told our government affairs staff and really our whole team during this time, is if we stay where our members are and we reflect what our members want us to do, then we'll be fine, even if it puts us on the opposite side of some of the things from the current administration. Like, we haven't changed our views or our core values. We just have some people in the new administration that don't agree with us. So,
but you're still just representing your members.
Yeah, and if we stay true to our values and our brand's values, then we'll be fine. And we need to just have that as our guiding light. And then that makes it so you don't have to question where you are on issues. You just have to go in and stick with that and then make the argument.
So just to give people context, you represent the Outdoor Industry Association.
That's right.
And what exactly, I mean, obviously this year it makes so much sense of what that represents and what that's doing. But in general, why was that created? And what has been your role?
So it was created more than 20 years ago, and it really was around the idea that the industry should come together and be unified and move forward on issues that matter to our customers and our brands and retailers.
So was it always political?
It was started around advocacy for sure.
Okay.
And so that was the initial goal, and it more focused on both creating areas to recreate, but also conserving lands. And then over time, we worked on other issues. So of course, the product sustainability work is newer, but has high member engagement, and I think it goes hand in hand with the advocacy work, because it's really about how do you make products that are lighter on the planet and have a lower footprint on the planet, and also treat the people who are making them well. And that is about keeping the places we recreate pristine by not harming those places by how we manufacture.
Yeah, it's a tough battle because on one hand, you're trying to support an industry that needs to make money by creating products
and selling more things.
While protecting these lands and the people. I mean, in some ways, it fights itself, right? I know that you had a big. Did you create the Eco Index and the HIGG about
the HIG,
which is all about creating sustainable products? Like, what did you find out with those things? Is it about striking a balance, or is it no matter? Personally, I've always wanted to create products that do no harm, but that's virtually impossible.
Yeah, until we get to completely closed loop where you just take this shirt and make a new shirt. We're a long ways from that. There's harm in creating. So I feel like part of it is using less water, using chemistry that's not as harmful but produces the performance that you need, right? You want to go out and not sweat but not get wet, right? So we have performance products. So our industry is uniquely positioned to drive innovation in that area, because we're making products that people take outside, and it's a life and death situation sometimes. Like, these products need to perform. But the other thing is, the more people who use our products and the more durable they are, that's better too, because if people keep things longer, you don't have to replace them. You can keep that jacket for a long time, and it's well made and it's still functioning. And then the other thing is, the more people we bring into the outdoor lifestyle, the more advocates we're going to have for the environment and for public land. So, I think part of our responsibility is to just get more Americans active. And then the other thing, of course, is like healthy, happy people. And that's really what inspired me after taking that year off to go climbing. It was such a gift, and it was amazing because I had this year where I didn't have emails to respond to, and the world slowed down. And I often reflect, if this one day I was sitting at Red Rocks and it was just this perfect day in the sun on the sandstone, and just knowing like this was a precious moment because life moves so quickly. And it really inspired me once it was time to get a job again, that I wanted to work in the outdoor industry and use my skill set around lobbying and advocacy in an area that I was personally passionate about. So that's when I moved back to Colorado and started looking for the job at OIA.
And how long have you been in this position?
I worked at OIA from 2005 to 2011, doing government affairs and sustainability. And then I went up and worked at MEC, which is like the REI,
of
Canada.
Canada, right?
They don't necessarily want to be called that, but
right.
It got started based on REI. And then I got to live in Vancouver, which of course is amazing.
Beautiful
city. And then when the executive director position came open 2 years ago, I moved back and took that job, the job I have now.
Right. And so you just put out this report saying our industry is $886 billion industry. That's like 4 times bigger than the beer industry. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, a lot of people are saying like, how did you get these metrics? It's huge. And I think that number has brought a lot of attention from the outside world. But yeah, there's also like, how did you come to this number?
Well, this is the 3rd time doing the report, and I think we're actually more confident in the numbers than we've ever been because we increased the sample size 70% this time. So our data is just better. But
When you say that, what does that mean?
like we went out and interviewed 26,000 people to get the number.
26,000 people.
And those surveys are long because they're asking.
Is this outside of our country as well? Because that's like the bigger than the GDP of Mexico and Turkey.
Yeah, it's just U.S. consumer spending.
Okay.
So yeah, we went out and we just interviewed Americans. And, one of the missing pieces from our economy before was the fact that there's so much travel and tourism related to outdoor recreation, and we weren't capturing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think it helped to show is that our industry is spread so broadly across so many job categories, and we weren't necessarily capturing that by just showing our outdoor gear sales.
I see.
And so
basically travel. So the
travel and tourism is a huge part of that number.
So anyone driving.
It's so you had to go out and be going on a trip, whether it was a week-long trip or one day, but the prime purpose of whatever you were doing needed to be outdoor recreation and one of those activities that we identified. And then whatever if you had purchased gear, if you bought gas for that trip, if you ate at this restaurant, stayed in this motel, stayed at this campground, that got captured. And so that's what's in there. Now, we really did want to be conservative with the numbers. So if you were visiting your grandma and that was like the main point of your trip and you went on a hike one afternoon, we didn't capture that. So the primary purpose needed to be, I'm going on this trip to recreate.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I think it also shows the trend, that it's cool to be outside. And maybe even if you were going to see your grandma, you tell your boss you're going for this cool hike, right?
Yeah.
And the water cooler chat.
Yeah. Well, if you look at and I think going back to something that brings all Americans together, and I think one of the best things is if you have a disagreement with someone, even at work, maybe the best thing you can do is go for a hike on your lunch hour, because you are outside. And already we know, like, being outside slows down your heartbeat, makes you just feel happier. And so you work out your differences too, but you also understand where the person's coming from and the different activities they like to do. And that's where I think we see, when you talk to someone about what's a strong memory from your childhood, a lot of people will talk about a trip to a national park, or that what do you remember about your dad? Well, he took me fishing, right? And so then you break down those barriers. And I mean, a good anecdote is we went in to see one of the congressmen from Illinois, and Congressman LaHood. And I thought, I looked at his district and I didn't really see a lot of outdoor recreation. So this was a couple weeks ago. I wondered, what are we going to talk with him about? And so we went in, and he was so happy to see us. And he started talking about how every year he does a trip with his sons where they come out here. And the last one they did is they did a backpacking trip through Grand Staircase, Escalante. And I asked him, did you get a guide? And he said, oh no, we did it on our own. They hiked from one side to the other. And that's impressive, because they are
so
not
easy to get lost.
Yeah,
there.
they're not, it's not obvious. And you don't want to get lost in the desert. And the year before that, they had done a similar thing in the Wind Rivers. So immediately, he's probably going to be our industry's advocate. And we thought, I'm not sure, given where he's from. So that's, and the other thing is, when our members go in, or we have athletes, of course, that go in and see members of Congress, we get the member meeting because people want to meet our famous athletes, or they want to talk about how much they love REI and their member card. And so we're fun.
So do you think that's going to be our strategy moving forward to protect these wild places? I mean, how do you see? It's true. The people light up when they talk about something that matters to them. At the same time, though, I wonder if that means, they might want to protect it, but just enough for themselves, or, this privatization of our public lands.
Yeah.
How do we make them care about the general public and giving new people an opportunity to have those experiences?
Well, I think people generally want a better world for their kids. And that's a universal wish. And so part of that is the ability to go outside and have the experiences you did growing up. You want your kids to have that opportunity, and you want actually them to have a better opportunity than you did. And so I do think while we go in and make the economic argument around job creation, and that is very powerful, and we'll talk about that, we're also going to talk about just the intrinsic value of our public lands. And I think this recent monuments review actually has really shown that, because they're reviewing 26 monuments and they're spread across the country. And so, they engaged Americans all around the country instead of just, people in Utah. And the fact that there are anywhere from 1.5 million to 2.5 million public comments, I think that might be the biggest.
It was 2.7. That was the final number.
I mean, and 9 out of 10 said leave the monuments alone. So,
yeah, I have to admit, this whole administration, being an athlete, I've always been like a closet environmentalist and felt like, well, that's not my area of expertise. What do I know? And so I'll let the professionals do the job. But as soon as, this administration started messing with our public lands, I have to admit, I didn't even know about some of these national monuments. Obviously, the national parks get a lot of attention, but they're also so regulated. And the monuments, you can camp anywhere. You can bring a dog. And there's sort of these gems that it has forced me to become more active, even though I still feel ignorant. And I think I'm hoping that a lot of people feel the same way, is that we've stopped waiting for someone else to do the job or to stand up or to say something, because I admit that I don't have all the information, and that's why I'm trying to learn from people like you. But yeah, any suggestions or techniques that we can have as citizens who don't know all the sides of the issues, and where we can have a voice and make an impact.
Well, I think especially for athletes like you, you have an opportunity to inspire people who want to be like you. And so you have a big social media following, and there's an opportunity, like everyone wants to see the great shots that you're posting and be inspired by your adventures. But then you also have the opportunity to, put in there, here's other ways to get involved, right? And do some education. And I don't think that people need to get so educated that they have to understand the intricacies of land management planning. And that's why we have people that do that at the agencies. But this general notion that public lands are an American birthright and they could be threatened. And so here's some, 3 simple things you can do to get involved. And so that people understand we can't take it for granted, and that if we don't stand up for the lands, then the opportunity to get out there could be imperiled. Mm-hmm. And I think that both our brands have been doing that and talking to their consumers, and I think athletes play a pivotal role. And so, yesterday we had the public land celebration. We went to the Capitol, and Conrad Anker was one of the speakers, and we were waiting for him because he was not there, and we knew he was back in the March. And finally, when he got up there, he was sweating because he had to run up the hill to the Capitol, and he said that he just kept getting stopped by reporters along the way wanting to talk with him, and it was because people know who he is, right? So he's an advocate, and he's well known, and he has a big following, and he talks to a different group. And like one of the best examples I can give you for that was President Obama went to Yosemite last year, and he stood in front of Yosemite Falls, and he talked about the importance of outdoor recreation, and he talked about our numbers. And the White House contacted us and said, hey, do you guys want to take over the White House Instagram feed? Whoa. With and if you could pick 10 athletes to do that. So we had this 12-hour period where, and you can go back, I'm sure it's still
I remember that speech.
Yeah, and you could, so then athletes were up there taking over the feed and posting pictures and then talking about what they do, but also,
the importance of conservation.
Public lands. But what I saw is you had this mix of people following these athletes and now people following the White House Instagram feed, and it's not necessarily like the same people.
Right.
And the comments were just awesome because you had this mixing of groups. And I remember one of the funniest ones was Jimmy Chin went last, and he posted a picture, that famous picture of Alex Honnold on Half Dome on the ledge. And this woman wrote, tagged her friend and said, hey, we were in Yosemite last weekend and I'm so relieved we did not do this hike. And she was totally serious,
Right.
So you see, there's this great opportunity to reach out to people that maybe aren't following Jimmy Chin on Instagram.
Right. Or people like Jimmy Chin now have
new
such
followers,
incredible political influence that we never imagined as athletes we could have. So
and I think that's of course, your opportunity as well.
Well, and speaking to Sally Jewell, she said over and over, people who are savvy on social media actually have a lot of power. And so anybody who might be listening, especially up and coming, the younger generation, you have so much more power than you think to educate your friends and inspire your friends to get outside and to learn the issues. So you don't have to be a politician to move the needle.
No, and I actually think it's a grassroots movement. So, and it is filled with inspiration. And I think that's where people who do have a big following have the opportunity, and I think almost an obligation, right, to take that attention that's on them and not only inspire people to get outside, but just inspire people to take other actions. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for what you do. I can't imagine. The world is asking you to step up, and it's been beautiful to watch you. Is there anything, any mantra that you tell yourself or that you would tell your younger self at a time when she really needed it?
Yeah, I think it's just stay humble and, stay true to your values. And then sometimes you just have to maybe retreat inside yourself a bit and refresh or, get energized again. And then you can come back out.
What is your ultimate goal? What is the vision that you would like to see on behalf of our industry, but also our world?
Yeah, just that, what I really want to see is that more people embrace an outdoor lifestyle and that they see themselves in it. And when they think about how to spend their free time, they choose to go outside. And I think the other thing is just really creating and building cities where you can incorporate the outdoors into your everyday life. And I think that's so powerful. So I think the more outdoors we get, the better off we're going to be as a society.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank
what a
you.
Beautiful picture. Cheers.
Embrace the outdoor lifestyle. Go outside. I couldn't have said it any better. I want to personally thank Amy again for taking the time to be on the show, and I hope you enjoyed listening today also. Shoot me a message on Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube and let me know what you thought about the conversation. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope today inspired you somehow to show up for something you truly believe in, or something you've been wondering about for a long time that makes your heart sing but doesn't necessarily make sense in all the other ways, financially or because your friends or parents or whoever will approve. That's where the magic is, unicorns. And that's where I'll find you. I'm Lynsey Dyer. See you in the mountains.